Hi, and welcome to AI for UX. This is the space where UX researchers and product leaders stay current with AI innovations. And I'm John, the founder of Brilliant Experience, and we're a psychology driven product innovation firm. So, personally, I've struggled to keep up with all the AI tools for UX research and insights, and I'm guessing I'm not alone, and that's why I started this series. And in each installment, we speak with a founder of one of the latest AI enhanced research tools to dive deep into its inspiration and learn how it might benefit you. And just think about where the industry is headed as a whole. And just as a quick note, these videos aren't product endorsements. We always pay full price for any technology we use at Brilliant, and no one's getting paid. It's just informational. So with that, let's get started. So I'd like to welcome Matteo Cera. So Matteo is the CEO of Glaut, and it's a tool that allows modern research teams to seamlessly integrate qualitative depth into your surveys, delivering richer insights faster. So thanks so much for agreeing to do this interview, and I'm delighted to have you here.
Thanks a lot, John, for the invitation. Honored to be here, and hi to everyone who is following us.
Excellent. Well, let's dive right into Glaut. So maybe you can tell me a little bit about who the sort of core target audience is for your product.
Absolutely. Um, Cloud is built for researchers. Researchers usually work in different type of entities. Most of the researchers that we serve at the moment are within market research firms and work as freelancers. Some of them are in-house research teams. Um, in general, what they have in common is one strong need and objective, which is to understand people behaviors um, beyond the numbers and the stats that usually they collect through research.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how we want to help them with cloud.
Yeah. And ultimately, what are do you feel is sort of the biggest pain point you're addressing, or how does your product sort of help with that?
Well, a couple. Historically, research has been always split between the qual and quant side. Um, Very insightful, but yet costly in terms of resources, time, and money interviews. And on the other side, very efficient and scalable quantitative surveys that are not always as insightful as the interviews. Somehow we want to bridge that gap, and that's why we created a new methodology that we call AMI, AI moderated interviews. And we think that in a hybrid approach that merges both the advantages of efficiency and scalability on one side, but also on the other side, the opportunity of asking open-ended questions and analyzing them in real time, we can really help researchers in getting richer information and therefore taking better decisions. That is probably by far the main objective. I would say a second one is just to improve the efficiency of research. There are many tasks that are historically very time consuming and not adding a lot of value. And somehow we want to remove them from the plate of the researcher and allow them to focus on what adds more value for the final customer.
Yeah. No, I think that makes a lot of sense. And we've at Brilliant have been amazed at like the kinds of time savings that are possible for us. So fair point. And so actually just from your perspective, what's a typical scenario of when people have been using Glaut and when a sort of product team or insights team might use your tool?
Sure. Um, Probably one of the best use cases lately has been for example, a product team to test a new product through cloud. That means showing an asset. It can be an image or a set of images, or it can be a video, and ask customers or potential customers, just users, for open-ended feedback. What do you think about this? What type of reactions or emotions does this type of stimulus create for you? And analyze this in real time means to have very quick answers to those questions. So asset testing is definitely one of our top use cases. For UX, I know that most of the people that follow us are UX researchers. I think a great use case is to test the use of a product through cloud it's not too dissimilar from an asset testing, but it has a different perspective because we have a ready product and we are testing the usability of it. So with Glaut, we can do it in multiple languages. That means getting information from multiple countries at the same time, whilst analyzing it in real time all together in a single project. And again, the fact that we can do it in a matter of hours rather than weeks or months can really add up to the potential of taking good decisions very quickly.
Very fair. And I don't think we, again, sort of the experience,
Mhm.
once you actually try these things, that you can think, yes, I'm going to test in France and Germany and China and America, and we're going to have the results, today's midweek by Monday, or
Mhm.
before is kind of amazing. Well, there
Well,
are, please go ahead.
sorry to interrupt on that,
Yeah,
but
no, go ahead.
what you're saying definitely rings a bell. If you have a large, let's say, a supermarket chain that is open, some of us are from Europe in our team, and uh, we do have these large supermarket chains that are open in many different countries with different languages. Uh, Now they basically have to decide one survey and then get it translated in different languages, get respondents from different countries on different panels, which means liaising with multiple stakeholders,
Yeah.
get the answers, both the closed and the open-ended, get the translation of those open-ended questions and integrate it in a single file. That literally takes weeks towards, 1 month or two. We can do it in hours in a platform like Cloud. So this is a very, very true example that rings a bell.
Absolutely. No, you're right on. Well, there are other offerings now that allow for data collection. That's sort of this sort of hybrid
Oh, yeah.
of qual and quant. So,
Yeah.
how would you say, you stand out, or what's sort of unique about Glout?
Hmm. Yeah, great question. It was actually interesting. I saw lately a stat that was both, inspiring, but also somehow created a bit of anxiety in me. There is a platform called Insight Platform that collected 42 companies building in conversational AI. So that's a lot of startups and, incumbents that are building similar solutions. So my perspective on this is, so we call Amy AI moderated interviews what we built, and I think it can become the standard of the industry, opposed to the Cowie, so the web surveys or the CATI, the telephone ones. We think that in the future we'll see a larger market share for AI moderated interviews, but somehow this will be a given. That means that many software are already offering very similar products to ours. Voice-based, very flexible, AI moderation done well, so with the right level of empathy and probing and follow-ups. But where I think that Cloud is betting to stand out is on the analysis side. If you collect hundreds or thousands of interviews, you then have to make sense of them, analyze them, and interpret them. So we are focusing our product efforts in making Cloud a strong fit with a researcher persona. We think the researcher is sophisticated, has experience, has hypothesis, and doesn't want to receive a black box type of answer. And that's why we are focused in building a software that has a very high level of control and can be customized very strongly by each researcher using it. So the same project can still be done in 10 different ways from 10 different researchers on Cloud. So the analysis and insight extraction is where we are focused on Cloud to stand out versus competitors.
Got it. And it isn't, my impression as I've been learning about Cloud is also that you sort of emphasize that voice interaction rather than say text interaction is preferable, or something that you're making sure you're fully capable of. So that was interesting as well. Well, actually,
Absolutely.
you know,
Voice is one of our core strengths from the respondent perspective. We think voice is a natural and probably the most natural way of speaking and listening to each other. And uh, obviously, surveys are built on typing the answers, and that's what the technology we had for the past 100 years allowed us to do. But within more and more experiences will be voice based, and yes, that's what we are betting on the interview side. Good point.
Got it.
Thanks for chipping
Yeah.
in.
No, no, no. Well, it was interesting to see. Well, and actually, your talk about analysis was actually really led nicely into something else I wanted to ask you, which was just so how should I think about working with a tool like yours? So, before Glout, I would do it one way, and obviously, like you were saying, that some things could take hours. But so, how would I think differently about how I even approach research? Like, so would I do it more frequently, or more globally, or faster, or
Mhm.
I think there's a lot of options here, and so I wanted to see how maybe you're seeing your clients use it and how you're seeing the sort of approach to research evolve.
Sure. Great question. Simply put, we want to break that, uh, you know, barrier between qual and quant. That means to just avoid the should we do a survey or a focus group and what should we do before. Um, I think that IDIs will still be done and executed the way they are done right now. So if for some reason we want to do, 1 hour, 2 hours long IDIs, we still will do the same way. But basically, the way that I think about cloud is every time that I thinking about running a survey with, hundreds or thousands of participants, I can use a cloud instead or complement my survey with cloud. What I mean with that is we can basically support any survey builder creation on cloud and replace the survey with a cloud experience that supports both closed-ended question and open-ended questions with voice moderation. Or we can complement an existing survey software and basically through an embedding mechanism, which means just to make
Mm-hmm.
sure that the two software can be perceived from the outside as a single experience, we can work on the researcher software and allow the researcher not only to run the typical survey that they did run for the past
Mm-hmm.
uh, 5 years, but complement it with a better way to ask open-ended question and analyze them. Many times, new customers come to Cloud with, we do open-ended questions already. I just have this, 2,000 open-ended, but I don't do anything about it because it takes me 2 weeks to get them coded. And we actually, this was a funny way to start with a couple of clients, say, hey, just give it to us. We will code for you for free. It just takes us a couple of hours to send it back to you. And that shows you the power of AI analysis. And because we could do that so quickly and so accurately, the customer actually changed their way of doing and started doing AI moderated interviews instead of a survey.
Yeah, I remember actually working for one of the parts of the federal
Mhm.
government in the US and having like 10,000 open-ended questions to sift through.
What
And
do you do with that,
hey,
right?
right. And every couple months that I had another set. Yeah. So I'm very thankful for new ways of sort of summarizing, but then still being able to dive in.
Mhm.
Um, and just to as we're thinking about AI doing analysis, logically, just people have heard of things like hallucinations or bias or other things like that. Can you just tell us generally? You certainly don't want your technological secrets, but sort of broadly, how you're sort of tuning your product to address these kinds of issues and just make sure you're getting the best results.
Um, so to make it super simple, the AI can be used in two main ways. One is we ask AI to give us answers, or which is the way that can create the hallucination, because the current version of large language models um, will tend to try to give an answer even though when the model is not sure about the answer and can lead to a bad answer, an incorrect answer. And that's where the cases of hallucinations are more frequent. But where we use AI is for a different use case, which is to interview people. So to be an interviewer, to ask questions. So the hallucinations are not really part of the job to be done by our software that uses AI.
Yeah.
Plus, we use AI for a third use case, which is to summarize and analyze and interpret data, which is another use case where AI excels. Um, versus the first one, the one where we ask question to the AI and we hope to get good answers, and we don't use it in that sense nowhere in the product. We don't think A is not a job to be done for our um, for our researchers, and B, we don't think the technology is actually yet there for that job. I've seen, some tools create synthetic answers and somehow simulate the answers of real people. We personally, we don't do it at Glaut. It's not a feature that we think it is, our focus at the moment. Maybe we'll build it in the future, maybe not. But with the current version of LLMs, we focus on the use of AI in interviewing people and analyzing data. So I would say very low or no risk for hallucination in those cases.
Got it. And well, good. I think we've talked around Cloud a fair bit. Maybe it's time to take a look, and you can give us a scenario when you might use it. So I'll tell you what. I'll work on my technology and setting up so you could share a screen, and maybe you can just introduce the sort of scenario in which you're sort of starting us out in a
Absolutely,
example.
yeah. Happy to. So we talked about UX and product. So I'm going to show you, a project, a demo project for the presentation of a potentially new product. In this case, the iPhone 16. I think that most of our audience has already experienced what an AI moderated interview is. You have the AI moderator that asks you a question, you answer, and there is some probing and so on and so forth. I will not focus on the interview side, on the respondent side, but I'll focus on what and how the researcher, will see and what the researcher can do on our platform to get good results. So this is the view from the researcher perspective who is programming the Glaut experience. This is the outline where the researcher has selected different type of questions. We have, different sort of questions from the closed-ended question like, what's your gender or how old are you, to open-ended question about the brand of the smartphone or, what are the first feelings that come out from you when watching a specific stimulus. In this case, we are showing them a picture of the iPhone 16. While we are creating the interview experience, the research, as said, has a lot of control and can customize this experience in many ways. For example, we created a nice feature. This is loved by our customer, which we call simulate questions. So whenever we draft a question, we can simulate the answers from customers, and that helps out to figure out every question, how is it likely to be answered by potential users, and somehow edit the question if the answers we're getting are not aligned with our research objectives. Now, let's think that we have already collected some answers. This is the point where we have this set of very long verbatim with hundreds of people. Another cool feature for the researcher to avoid resources being spent in a bad way is what we call synthetic answers. Synthetic answers are artificial answers created by our software to simulate what the result of the AMI, of the AI moderated interview, would be before starting the project. It happens so many ways that researchers start with a set of questions in the middle of the project. They realize that they had, another thing they want to investigate, and they have to, edit the research live, and this usually leads to a bit of confusion and double work. So we created this synthetic answers so that researcher can basically simulate what the end product would be before actually having spent money in interviewing people.
And
So,
Matteo, I'm sorry.
yep.
So would I typically use that synthetic answers in advance of launching this? Is that the sort of
Right.
ideal scenario? Yeah.
Yeah. In advance, We just simulate what
Mm-hmm.
a final report would look like so that while we read this mock report, we can ask ourselves, is there anything else that I want to
Mm.
investigate? Am I missing a question? Oh, maybe these two questions should change order, but it's much easier to do while I have some mock data to analyze rather than just to do it with a pure outline, the sequence of the question. So that's why we build this feature for the researchers. Now, as said, our focus is and strength is on the analysis side. So let me show you a few things that I think are very useful for researchers. So in general, we can for example, question number 3 or 4 was about, what are the impressions that you get from looking at this picture of the iPhone? And as you can see in real time, we can get um, the coding of these answers. And this has um, some topics like visually appealing and modern, or noted for its excessive shininess, with some subtopics that our software identifies and pairs every verbatim with. As said, we think the researcher needs to have the control and the power of edit this.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, research can, edit one of these verbatim, or even, for example, this one just came out once, and I'm like, no, I want to merge it with another one, sleek design. I don't think that this verbatim makes sense. And in a second, these two verbatim will have one single topic or one single code. So that's the power of being, editable and customized by the researcher. What you see here is the analysis of a question of what are the feelings that came out, and people answer it with their opinions. But we can use Glaut not only to code open-ended questions, but also to interpret them. Let me make you an example. We added an analysis that we call interpretative to, and we asked Glaut, the software, to review the verbatim and somehow extract the key emotion that could be assigned to every verbatim. We never asked the customer, the potential customer, what are the emotions that you are feeling. We ask them for impressions about the specs of the iPhone, but we can interpret the emotions from the verbatim. And I think this really adds a superpower that the researcher otherwise would have to do this analysis manually, reading all across the verbatim. So in this case, for example, we used a standardized approach to emotions. I think it's 8, 9 key emotions, and there are some verbatim that did not have any emotion recognizable in the verbatim, and that's fine. But think about the time a researcher would have spent in trying to assign one or the other emotion to every single verbatim.
And Matteo, I'm sorry,
Yep.
this is really interesting. So, in addition, if I'm right, in the far right panel, you're showing here are the exemplars that are so for joy. Here are the ones that are the ones that were
That
coded as
have been
joy.
assigned to
Yeah.
joy. Exactly. So on the far right, I can see all the list of the verbatim that have been assigned to joy or disgust or surprise and so on and so forth. Correct. And this
Cool.
is, so if I go back to the other one, this is also for every code and subcode. Probably the final thing is about being able to cross interpret 2 or more questions. So we have seen now the direct analysis and an interpretive analysis of a single question, but now I want to show how to say, okay, there is another question where we asked about the purchase driver, and uh, what came out was this thematic analysis. We already saw how to do it and how it is working on Glaut. But let's say that I want to break it down by the gender or the age of respondents. I can do it, and what Glaut will do is will basically lead me to the results of the same analysis, the purchase driver, but now segmented by age. And in this case, if I'm a researcher, I have already saved the time of reading the verbatim, assigning a code and subcode, creating this into Excel, and then analyzing the Excel and creating this type of segmentation. We have done everything now in Glaut in a few seconds. Um, the final step is going from the data to interpretation and
Mm-hmm.
narrative. And I think that's where
Yeah.
the magic happens in the researcher mind. So, for example, a researcher would look at this and see that camera comes out high in basically uh, very young people, camera, also a bit in the older people. But if I remember correctly, yeah, in this segment between 25 and 44, it's actually lower. So, sorry, 35 and 44, it's actually lower, and battery and performance are taking more value. So these type of things the researcher would do manually. What I wanted to show you as the final part is we can ask Glaut to surface them for us. So if you know, we had to do the report before because it would have taken a few minutes, but if we would be live, we could just add this to the report, and what would come out is basically a narrative about this paragraph, this type of analysis. So for example, in this case, in this paragraph, we would see those insights coming out from the interpretation of that analysis that took the purchase drivers, broke it down by the age group of people, and tried to notice the differences to write an insight about them. So in this case, for example, camera was very important for the younger age population, probably because of the use of social media. And for the older part, more probably working people, the battery life was increasingly important. So we have done this on Glaut in a few seconds, and in a couple of minutes, we can reflect it in what is an executive summary that we can present to the client. So yeah, our strong
Interesting.
focus is on this side.
Yeah. And actually, just to be clear, so I, as the researcher or insights expert, I'd have my hands on the controls here, be able to dive in, and basically Gout just provides this. Interesting. So,
We
go ahead.
we actually have two ways of partnering with
Oh, good.
customers.
I'm glad I
One
asked.
is, let me go back here. So one is our team gets, into the control seat. We are an extended version of your research team. We will program Glaut for you. We will test Glaut with a panel manager of your choice, and we'll make sure to get basically to an end um, set of data that we can give back to you as the deliverable. Or on the other side, we will onboard you or your team, and the researcher, will use Glaut directly. That means program the AMI, the AI moderated interview directly, and do the analysis directly. Depending on the market research firm or agency, we have done one or the other approach.
And Matteo, we've seen an example, and I know we just had a few minutes, just
Sure.
from a single survey. But if I had done 20 over the course of a year, I wasn't sure if your focus was primarily on each survey and beautiful analysis sort of immediately, or it was how I might bring together a corpus of data to
Oh
get
yeah,
insights.
that's a great point. We started from an individual perspective, every project trying to get as much insights and saving as much resources as possible. But the vision we have for Glaut is to become a system of record for the researchers. That means on Glaut, we are now building a new logic where every information and data which is collected, obviously respecting the boundaries of specific customer that the researcher might have, but within the customer XYZ, making sure that every new project is basically adding a compounding value to the research team. That means in the future, the researcher will be able to investigate and ask Glaut for some sort of insights, leveraging maybe 2 or 3 projects across the history of that client, instead of having to go back to every individual one and somehow looking at an individual level. So this is where we're getting to. It probably will take us many, months of work, but we think in the future, Glaut will be the system of record for the researcher and will allow them to use Glaut as a Google a Google-like version of the knowledge of that research team.
Yeah. Oh, one of the things that I've sort of heard in passing as I've done these interviews is the interest that some folks like very senior executives like, you mean I can just ask a question and get answers from this and I don't have to go through my research team? So I didn't know if you felt like, the audience who are actually using your tool is sort of expanding from just us sort of hardcore researchers to more broadly product or innovation or insights or leadership kind of teams.
At the end of the day, the functions of product and UX are built within companies to help people, and in many cases, senior leaders, to just take better decisions. So I think it is kind of natural that different stakeholders can see and somehow use the product in different
Mm-hmm.
ways. Uh, Product teams can change, executives can change. I think the power of a software is that it should outlast the person that is using it
Yeah.
today, but somehow be valuable to the company that paid that research, despite the researchers not anymore working for that company. So how do we do that? We have to create a way that the data collected into a project is somehow leverageable by both the senior team or other stakeholders within the firm in a way that does not depend on the researcher that executed the project 2 years back, 3 years back.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we're building.
Yeah, oh, really interesting to see how this is evolving. Well, are there other things? I think you finished kind of showing us the sort of core
Yeah.
example. That's great. It was really interesting, and yeah, I learned a lot. What are you finding right now about folks? Either really there were two ways that you felt like folks could use your tool today. Either using their really survey tool they're used to and
Mhm.
adding on Glaut, and the other was sort of transitioning to fully Glaut. And I guess I see advantages to the latter, and I just didn't know how you're seeing people progressing.
It's a great question. We, I mean, we're building a new methodology that
Mm.
hasn't existed before. Um, until, last year, you had surveys and interviews. There was not a
Mm-hmm.
lot of
Yeah.
diversity. Um, so different people react differently to new things. And um, when the potential customer is a bit more risk adverse, or when they have a long-standing type of research project that they have done for many years, like a tracker or something, I think it makes sense to keep their way of doing things, at least to start with, and complement that methodology, usually survey, with a cloud experience on specific points. So we really worked on embedding our
Mm-hmm.
software into existing platforms. On the other side, when the customer is, you know, more risk taker or doesn't have the legacy of a project that comes from behind, it just makes sense to go directly on cloud and live, you know, a native voice-based experience
Mm-hmm.
without, having legacy software in between. At the end of the day, it just depends by, the different situations. And I don't think that at the moment there is a better way of doing. I think it's really,
Yeah.
context driven.
Fair. Very thoughtful. Well, I do want to ask. We really focused on Cloud itself, and
Hmm.
there is your passion behind this, and in your other founders and developers and so on. You know, it takes so much effort to do this kind of thing, and I guess I'm saying this as someone who isn't ready yet to try such a thing. What inspired you to create this product and for this particular field? I mean, I think you've got a pretty varied background, so I am curious to hear how you're thinking about this.
Um, I started my career as a consultant. So we're talking about almost 20 years ago, and I was doing both a lot of surveys and a lot of interviews. Actually, in a project, there's a fun anecdote. At that time, we started this project because there was a weird, data from a survey. It was a huge survey for a bank in Central America, where basically the branches that had higher NPS were the ones where the waiting time to be served in the queue to the
Hmm.
teller was higher. And for us, it was just unbelievable to think how these two data, high waiting time but very good NPS. Um, and I literally spent 2 months visiting 24 different branches and then
Yeah.
interviewing people in the queue to understand people were okay in waiting a long time, uh, as long as they were served and their problems, usually with this buggy app that the bank just released, were solved. So they were okay in waiting 40, 45 minutes to be served, but they wanted the problem to be solved. And there were some other branches that just dismissed people that said, we cannot serve you. We don't have time to solve. This is a tech problem. This is a headquarters level. We don't solve it at the branch level. And they received just bad NPS. I would have never imagined that nor
Mm.
understood from the survey. And somehow this is something that always, stuck with me. And I still remember that in the power of combining both experiences. But truth to be told, we didn't start Glaut for market research. Glaut, the first prototype was a job interviewer. So we're still using conversational AI,
Mm-hmm.
but for
Yeah.
hiring. My
Yeah.
previous company is still focused on um, home services, and we are interviewing about 500 people per month. So I wanted to build a tool that would just be more efficient in interviewing people that were looking for a job. But what we quickly discovered was that job hunting is mainly going through a funnel of yes or no. Do you have the right level of experience? Are you allowed to work in this country? And so on and so forth. And the hiring process didn't need those nuances and insights that usually can come out through a conversation. On the contrary, it was making these
Mm-hmm.
nuances yes or no's into a survey. So for hiring, the survey was a much better product.
Mm-hmm.
And those two things, my previous experience and this first prototype of Glaut, merged into what Glaut now is, which is, software for researchers.
Yeah. Oh, really interesting. I'm glad I asked. Is there anything, you've come a long way with Cloud. Is there anything that you're, sort of milestones or achievements that you're particularly proud of that you've been able to have happen at Cloud? And really, probably you and your team. Shouldn't just say you, but
Um, getting probably the first customers and um, getting the first feedback on the usage of the platform was, for me, a very strong emotion. Um, it's about 10 years that I've been through different tech companies, and somehow I know that it's a very long journey, but the type of feeling and emotion that I feel when a customer is, excited, not only, happy or satisfied, but is really enthusiastic about using the product is what not only what makes me happy, but what keeps me up at night and want me to work even more and build more. So probably, you know, that is a strong feeling that will always be there.
yeah. No, I understand, and that it's that customer-driven focus. Is it, I actually just this is something I didn't expect to ask, but I did a little bit of research and just noted that you're based in Italy and you got
Yeah.
some funding there. Is there anything about being in that center? We meet lots of folks in Silicon Valley or all over the world, really, who are doing these kinds of things. How do you feel about how it's going? Really, just is there anything special about being an Italian company in your mind, or not?
Um, I guess, I mean, obviously the US is the largest market in the world for research in general, and we are aware of that. But on the other side, what we are seeing is that every country, being it Europe or other continents as well, has its own nuances and issues across the value chain of research. In some countries, it's very hard to find respondents. In some countries, it's very hard to engage with the respondents in qualitative way. Some countries have very low penetration of internet and so on and so forth. So depending on the countries, there are just different challenges. I think the advantage of not starting from the US is that we are much more focused on those nuances and somehow want to build globally from day one. Obviously, the US is a sad, a very, very large market, but the other markets are also very attractive and probably less competitive than the US itself. So, for example, doing multi-country, I think for US firms doesn't really ring a bell because probably most of them do research in English. Some of them might do in Spanish. But if you speak with, I don't know, a French company that has, 20 European countries, that's a problem where they spend, hundreds of thousands of euros, not dollars per year in those translations. So somehow those problems are more painful in some other geographies. So I think that's an advantage
Yeah.
somehow.
Yeah, very fair. I come from Canada, and
Mm,
we are always a little bit of the little guy relative to the U.S. So have a little bit of empathy for what it's like to not be the whatever. So very nice. Well, let's actually turn to just where you see all this heading. Being someone that's got a product and offerings, you kind of have
mhm,
to, in Canadian, I'd say where you have to skate to where the puck is going. And
right.
so, where do you see a Glout evolving, and ultimately, how do you see this whole sort of insights world evolving over the next while?
I'm sorry if I maybe repeat a couple of concepts, but somehow they are at the
No.
basis of our, you know, thought process. So I guess one, we personally think at Cloud that researchers want to stay in control and want to somehow be empowered but not replaced by software. That means not in a dystopian type of perspective, but that means that the software should help every researcher execute and interpret the research projects in their own way and with their own hypothesis. And that's why we're leaving a very strong control and level of customization to every researcher to use cloud. Um, we do believe AI can and should replace all the low value added tasks that a researcher is doing and is spending way too much time as of today. And looking at the future, there are basically two ways we strongly use software. One is to interview people, and two is to analyze those interviews and data, being it structured from a survey or unstructured from an interview. For the interviewing part, what I'm mostly excited about is going from only text type of interview to actually understanding not only what people are saying, but how they're saying and what's happening around them. I think the future of cloud will be to uh, understand what's going around in your context while you are answering. So if you think about all the so-called digital ethnography, where you try to get into people's home and try to
Hmm.
understand what's happening there, I think that's where um, the software is going to go. And on the analysis side, I think we touched upon it briefly before. Um, we really want cloud to become a system of record for research, and that means going from an individual project setup to um, a compounded set of data that has been accumulated for a certain company from researchers on cloud, and that cloud can allow either researcher or executive to ask and get answers from, um, independently from who executed the project X years ago. So those are the two directions where I see the interview side and the analysis side go.
Yeah, and for those of you that haven't tried these kinds of things yet, you just have to try it to understand its power, and where today it's awesome. In other places where you want to dive in as the human, and you've got a different strategic mindset, but very cool. And I've learned a lot about how you're, you know, I don't know, a little bit uniquely positioned relative to some other things, and really, no, I think it has great promise. So thank you.
Thanks a
Well,
lot.
for folks, so you got me intrigued. For other people who might want to give it a try or learn more,
Yep.
what do you recommend? Do they go to your website or reach out to you? How do you recommend this happens?
Sure, happy to. So our website is Glaut with a T at the end, glaut.com. On glaut.com, you can book a demo. Most likely it's going to be with me. So I'd be happy to, welcome you and show you around. Um, Probably we can share somewhere um, in the video my
Sure.
email, and yeah, we'll take it from there. We are working already with customers in 4 out of 5 continents. So we really look forward to meeting people not only from UX and product, but also from more market researchers to
Hmm.
customer researchers. There are just different use cases that cloud
Yeah.
is used from. And as said, we work in those 2 ways. We can either support you as an extension of your research team or just onboard you on the use of cloud and let you use it autonomously. And yeah,
Very cool. Well, here, thank you so much for your time. At some point, I've got to let you stop and get back to Cloud. So I really
thank you.
appreciate it. And no, thank you, Matteo, for so much for sharing it with us. And well, here,
Great.
I'll just sign us out. So that's all for today. And thank you for tuning in and keeping up with the latest on AI for UX research and for insights. Subscribe and let us know in the comments what else you'd like to have us feature next and other things you were interested in this product. So wishing you brilliant insights with AI.